The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So all went to be enrolled, each to his own town. And Joseph too went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David that is called Bethlehem, because he was the house and family of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. While they were there, the time came for her to have her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were shepherds in the region, living in the fields and keeping the night watch over their flock. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were struck with great fear. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I proclaim to you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For today in the city of David a Savior has been born for you, who is Christ and Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find an infant wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was a multitude of the heavenly host with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth to those on whom his favor rests." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, I think it's safe to say good morning to you. Good morning and Merry Christmas. You know what my favorite thing is about Christmas? Sarah? No? Well, it's not the presents, though I love presents. And it's not the food, though I tell you what, I eat well during Christmas time. All my favorite Italian delicacies do I make. This may surprise you. My favorite thing for Christmas is watching little children come over here to the manger scene and look inside. It's amazing. Right before the 4 o'clock Mass, Dee Carney, who's a long-term parishioner here, her 2 little granddaughters, Cece Davis and her little sister. Cece's in our 2nd grade and her little sister's in preschool. And they were kneeling right here looking, and Cece, who's a very bright little girl, was pointing to the various characters and telling her little sister, you know, what this is all about and what this had to do with the story and all that. And I think it's because of the innocence you see in them, and that it makes you recall your innocence. You remember when we were little children? Everything was magical. Everything was pure. Everything just had an awesomeness about it. And then, as I always say, the pimples pop. And it seems that everything changes from there. How many of you are aware of Garrison Keillor? Okay, I love Garrison Keillor. If you get a chance, he's still on public radio, they tell me. Garrison Keillor is a comedian from a small Midwestern town, and he loves to tell stories about his life growing up in that town and to kind of do a comparison and a contrast between life today and what it was like back in Lake Wobegon, as he calls it. And in one of his stories, it's about Christmas in his town. And he talks about Christmas being the return of the exiles, he says. That's what he calls them, the exiles. All the people who left the little community to go out into the big cities and make it in the big world. He says, you know, they all come home for Christmas. And some of them go to church with their aging parents, and some of them don't. And yet somehow, as they're forced to face the old hometown, and as they're confronted again by who they are and what they become, there's a sort of wistfulness, he says, that sets in. You see, he says, Kaler, they all believe. They all believe in themselves, or in their looks, or in their skills, or in their luck. They all believe. But here's the crunch of Christmas. As they see the old hometown again, as they talk to their wrinkling grandparents, as they walk the streets that now seem so short and crude, they wonder to themselves. They wonder. They wonder in their hearts if they've chosen the wrong gods. And you know, you can say the same thing about the non-exiles, the hometown crowd who never left, or who left and came back to live here for good. It seems that the older we get, the more cynical we get, the more sarcastic we get, the more negative and pessimistic we tend to get. And a lot of that has to do, on one hand, with the experiences we have in this life. You know, those tangled webs that we weave from the time we become teenagers and we grow on. Those joys and sorrows, those pains and agonies, those experiences we go through in abundance through life. But then also we're conditioned as well by this technological mindset that we have. You know, if technology can't prove it, it doesn't exist. Or to put another way, the pure scientific mindset. You know, if it's not scientific, why do I want to look at a nativity scene? Give me proof that it existed. You know, give me evidence other than that fairy tale book called the Bible. You know, I remember when I went off to the seminary in Baltimore, unbeknownst to me, they sent me to actually the toughest seminary in the country. It was academically the best, without a doubt. But unfortunately, as great as it was academically, it was bankrupt spiritually. You see, they trained us to be scholars. They trained us to be scientists, theologians. That's what theologians are. We're scientists. But they forgot about the part of being pastors and priests. And so what happened when you started out in your biblical studies there at that seminary, all of our professors at that level, those 101 levels and 110 levels, were new PhDs. You know, you could see in their offices their new PhD diplomas. The ink was still dripping. It was so fresh. They were very cynical in the classroom. They loved to poke fun at you, and if you dared speak up and shared one of your traditions, for instance, about the manger, they would scoff at you and tell you how unsophisticated you are. And a lot of guys really lost their faith during that period of time. Some became very hardened and very cynical. And I must admit it was a challenge for me personally, but I still kept praying my rosary. But then the day would come when I would go on and do my postgraduate work. And I was fortunate to have a priest who was world-renowned scholar of the Gospel of Luke, Father Joseph Fitzmyer, a Jesuit priest. He's still alive today, but he's basically retired. Father Fitzmyer was an incredible man of faith, and the thing that amazed me, he was unbelievably humble. He had a masterful knowledge of ancient languages, which I actually envied. And he would teach us about how science can serve faith, not the other way around. And so he managed to lead us through, based on good scientific research, especially coming from the field of archaeology. What can we say for sure, scientifically, about that manger scene, about the birth of Jesus? Well, here's what Father Fitzmyer led me through in terms of my knowledge. First of all, the nativity, the birth of Jesus, was an incredible phenomenon. So much so, there has been more written throughout the centuries, and especially in ancient times, about the birth of Jesus than any other leader in history. Think about it. We have more ancient manuscripts and copies of manuscripts about the birth of Jesus than we do of any of the great emperors in history, any of the Caesars, any of the pharaohs. Now, my brothers and sisters, that speaks volumes alone why so much written about the birth of Jesus? Secondly, we are the only religion on the face of the earth, and throughout history, Christianity, that believes that the deity, that God, truly became flesh and came to this world in the form of a little baby. No other religion in history, in the history of civilization, believes such a thing. Oh, gods come to this earth, the pagan gods do, in various and sundry forms, animals, sometimes human beings, but never an infant baby. That's unique to Christianity. And then the real kicker, when gods did appear in this earth, the pagan gods, they were always kingly, royal, those sort of things, almighties, never born in a feed trough, a manger, a stable where domestic animals lodged. So there are things about Christianity that set it apart, for which we have documentation. We've unearthed so many things through archaeology, and Lord only knows what's still underneath the earth that hasn't been brought up yet. So the story of Jesus can be validly explained with science, and it's an amazing story. There are none others like it. But that's the science part of Jesus. Still, you see, we get so distanced from him. We grow up and we're so far away from the manger because of our complex way of living and thinking. And sometimes we think we're too big for the manger. You see, I'm an adult. I've got life experience, and I don't have time for little baby stories. That's for children, and so on and so on. And how unfortunate that is. But you know what? Whether you're an exile or non-exile, we're all searching for something. And that's what Christmas talks about. You can't buy it, you can't earn it, you can't even own it. We're searching for love, something towards which we can long and hope. That's what we're looking for. One little boy discovered that in our parish school in actually a tragic sort of way. He came to our school in the first grade. His name is Tahal. I can't even pronounce his last name. But his family came here from Pakistan a couple of years ago. When Tahal entered our school at the first grade level, he was a cute little boy, chocolate-covered skin and beautiful chestnut eyes. Just a sweet little boy, but I could hardly ever get him to talk. And I thought, well, maybe he's just shy. I guess I wouldn't be saying much either if I'd moved to Pakistan. But he went with one of our seasoned teachers, and I told her about my concern, and she agreed there was a little bit of concern. But after a while, Tahal opened up. In fact, sometimes you couldn't shut him up. He was always talking. He loved his classmates and friends. Well, Tahal's in the second grade now, and he has one of our seasoned long-term teachers, Mrs. Margaret Mew. Margaret Mew's been teaching for a long time. In fact, I always tell people when I describe her, is that God created dirt, and then 2 years later, Margaret Mew started teaching. And she's got a unique teaching style I've discovered through the years. She's not a demanding teacher, but the way she teaches is she loves it into her students. She's a big mush ball, is all she is, a big fuzzy mush ball, just filled with love. And she loves knowledge into her kids. It's amazing. You go into the room, they're eating out of the palm of her hand. And yes, she can be tough, but she loves the knowledge into those kids. Well, back in the fall, not too long after school got started, we received horrible news about little Tahal. His mother, who was 7 months pregnant, had a rupture in her umbilical cord, and amniotic fluid seeped out into this area. Well, her 7-month-old baby died in the womb, and they had to remove the little baby. And then the mother shortly thereafter went into a coma. the sepsis set in, and her whole body was fighting this horrible infection. And she lay there in intensive care. I went to go see her a couple of times. She was totally unconscious. Tahal was never permitted to go see his mother. That's a Middle Eastern thing. And so I remember thinking to myself in my last visit there, I just didn't think she was going to make it. And then what were we going to do with Tahal? What were we going to say to him? And she did die, and she was buried, and Tahal was not told of anything, none of it. And so now all of a sudden, when the time came and he kept asking questions about why his mommy wasn't coming home, where's my mommy, when's mommy coming home? You know, finally they told him. And Tahal really was hurting about this. It was hard to tell it by his little face at school because he was always smiling and bouncing. But he would go to Mrs. Muth and tell her, you know, when's my mommy coming home? Where's my mommy? And so he learned that his mommy is with God. So just recently, he became enamored by something that Mrs. Muth has around her neck. She has a little medal. And it was given to her by Sister Mary Michael, a Palatine sister here in Huntington. She picked it up when she went to Rome, and the Pope blessed it. So Margaret's had it around her neck. And it's an abstract picture of the Madonna and the child, the Blessed Mother holding the little baby Jesus. Tahal was just enamored with this thing, almost obsessed by it. And so Mrs. Muth took the time to explain to him how much Mary loved little Jesus and how she cared for little Jesus and was tender towards little Jesus. And so our art teacher, Mrs. Anderson, gave the second graders an assignment not too long ago. And the assignment was to do an abstract concept of something, whatever. You could pick the topic. And lo and behold, he picked the topic of the Madonna and child. In fact, I've got a picture of it. When Mrs. Muth received this from Tahal, I was so overwhelmed with emotion. I just had to see it because I figured through this art piece, Tahal is communicating something to us. And so here it is. You can't see it, and it may be difficult to interpret anyway. But in the red here is the Blessed Mother, and right below there's a little patch of red. And what the image is meant to convey is the Blessed Mother holding little baby Jesus close to her in her hands, her arms like this. And I told Margaret, I said, you know what Tahal's saying to us? You've told him well about how much Mary loved little baby Jesus and how she cared for little baby Jesus. Tahal misses that in his own mother. And so he's looking to the Blessed Mother as a way of experiencing that tenderness, that love, that care that his mother could no longer give him. And you want to hear the amazing part of the story? Tahal's a Muslim. A Muslim. Tahal, through this tragic experience, has learned a lesson we all must learn in this life if we're ever going to experience peace and joy. He's learned at this young age that there is somewhere you can go. There is someone, someplace that can give you meaning in this life when at times life seems so meaningless. And that's the manger. That's the baby. And so accomplish what you want to accomplish in this life. Be as sophisticated intellectually as you want to be. Have all the money in the world, all the power and prestige. You're going to still be lonely deep inside. You're still going to have a hunger inside for something that this world cannot give. And it is amazing, in God's plan, He would give it to us in an animal feeder, a trough, a food trough for animals. So my brothers and sisters, my wish for you this year is to learn what Tahal learned the hard way in this life. There is only one source for true peace, one way to give meaning to life. We need to stop being arrogant and so sophisticated about everything and become like Tahal and all the little children who peek in that manger. And may we know that whatever you've done in this life, what tangled webs you have woven, all of that means nothing to the baby. All he wants to do is to love you the way he loved all his people and his mother Mary. Why not let him do that?